On a clear early autumn day, with the sky high and cloudless, President Donald Trump stepped down from the Marine One helicopter. The large door of the White House closed behind him, and the guards in black uniforms quickly formed a security detail. He didn't appear tired or tense. On the contrary, with his confident stride and serious expression, he resembled a decisive leader, but deep inside, there were unresolved worries. Today, he didn't have an important speech or meetings with world leaders. Instead, he was visiting a school in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. This trip was organized at the request of a group of elite students who had participated in a national science competition. Children, sometimes, can bring fresh ideas, he thought. But everyone knew, what he was truly looking forward to was a light meeting, not too stressful. The school wasn't very large, located in a quiet neighborhood with lush green trees, and its front walls were brightly colored, reflecting the joy and vibrancy of youth. The students were lined up, their faces bright, eagerly waiting for their country's president. When Trump entered the auditorium, the applause erupted like a powerful wave. He waved his hand lightly, and the people around continued cheering. The teachers and students felt proud to see him here, but there was also a bit of tension. They knew his presence not only brought moments of excitement, but also an opportunity to discuss important issues. After he sat down, a student stood up. Emily, a girl with long hair and bright eyes, like a small flame in the crowd. Emily wasn't like the other students. She wasn't here to listen to the president speak, but to ask questions she had prepared for a long time. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't let the tension affect her. She stepped up to the podium, stood before him, and after a brief moment of silence, she spoke. "Mr. President, you once said that we would not rejoin the Paris Agreement on climate change because you believe it is not beneficial for the country. But why didn't you think about future generations, children like us, when the actions we take today will decide the future of this planet? Do you think we are destroying the environment we will have to live in for the rest of our lives?" The sharp question cut through the air, and the room suddenly fell silent. The students around Emily looked at her, and in their eyes, there was respect. They never thought that a question from a young girl could silence the president, as if he were seriously contemplating it. Trump looked at Emily for a moment. He didn't answer immediately, but just slightly raised an eyebrow, as if trying to find a worthy response. A strange feeling passed through him. This wasn't just a casual meeting. This was a real dialogue. "Actually, Emily," he said, his voice deep and thoughtful, "sometimes big decisions must be made based on the overall benefit. We need to protect the country's economy, and sometimes that means making a few small sacrifices. However, I also understand that environmental issues are important." Trump's answer didn't satisfy everyone, but Emily didn't stop. She continued, her gaze fixed on him. "Would you be willing to change, Mr. President? Could you look at this issue not just from a short-term perspective, but from a longer-term view, for the generations to come?" Emily kept asking questions, one after another, not giving him a chance to counter. She talked about scientific research, climate changes the world is facing, and the responsibility this generation must bear. Her words were not only sharp, but also full of passion, and Trump, despite being a man who had weathered many ups and downs in his career, couldn't deny the power in her words. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. How could a young girl have such profound insight? Not an adult, but a child seeing things he couldn't see? Trump stood up, not to leave the room, but to walk toward Emily. "Emily," he said, his voice now softer, "I think I can learn something from you." The entire auditorium fell silent, as if everyone was waiting for the next part of the story. Emily looked at him, her eyes bright, not expecting that her proposal would cause the President of the United States to change his perspective on the issue. Trump stood up, but not with the usual cold or arrogant expression. His eyes were now filled with thought, and there was something unfamiliar, as if he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. As he walked toward Emily, the silence enveloped the room like something heavy, creating a strange atmosphere between the President of the United States and a 12-year-old girl. Emily stood there, her eyes wide, slightly surprised but not fearful. She didn't look away from him, as if she believed she could change something significant. Though her heart was pounding, the confidence in her questions made all her anxiety fade away. "You know," Trump began, his voice a bit hoarse, "when I first entered politics, I always thought that everything had to be viewed from a pragmatic perspective, where the interests and power of the country are most important. But today, you've made me reconsider. Your questions are very profound. Perhaps I haven't looked far enough into the future. Emily tilted her head slightly, her eyes glowing. She didn't know her words had such a powerful impact on him. She wasn't expecting an immediate change, but perhaps, in a brief moment, she had made a powerful man stop and reflect on himself. "Mr. President," Emily said, her voice soft yet resolute, "I'm not saying everything has to change right away. But if we don't start changing now, it might be too late. The environment is an issue no one can avoid, no matter who they are." Trump smiled, a fleeting smile that seemed like an acknowledgement. "Maybe you're right," he admitted. "I'll consider this. You've opened a door I've never thought of before." Each word from Trump felt like an acceptance, though not an immediate change of perspective, yet a shift in the way he viewed things. The feeling inside him was strange, a mix of pride and thoughts he had never experienced before. A small girl, not an expert or researcher, had made him reconsider himself, his policies, and his vision for the country. The auditorium remained silent, but it seemed like there was a gentle shift in the atmosphere. The students and teachers exchanged looks, and in their eyes was surprise, sometimes respect. Not because the president had completely changed, but because they saw another side of him, a side they had never thought of, a person who could learn, listen, and change, no matter who he was. Emily stood there, in the meaningful silence. She knew she had not only asked a question, but had opened up a real dialogue, a conversation that could change the way not only the president saw things, but also how those who witnessed it perceived him. Trump turned back and looked at Emily once more, his gaze filled with respect. "Thank you," he said, his words more sincere than ever. "You've made me think about more important things." After the meeting, President Trump returned to the White House in a quiet state. Unlike the usual times when he stepped down from Marine One, the atmosphere around him seemed darker, as if Emily's words still echoed in his mind. Her questions were not just a challenge, but a reminder of the things he had overlooked, of an issue he had never properly addressed. The environment, the survival of the planet, the future of the next generations, all of these now suddenly seemed more important than ever before. Entering the Oval Office, Trump sat down in his familiar leather chair. The lights in the room were turned on, casting a glow that highlighted the items around the room, but that light couldn't brighten the thoughts in his mind. He shook his head, as if trying to shake away the clouds that surrounded his thoughts. His advisor, Kellyanne Conway, entered the room with a large file. "Mr. President, here's the latest report on economic and political issues. We've also prepared some new strategies for infrastructure development projects," she said, but Trump's gaze wasn't focused on the report. Trump nodded vaguely but didn't open the document. He leaned back in his chair and turned to Kellyanne. "I need you to do something else," he began, his voice sounding somewhat unexpected. Kellyanne looked at him, her eyes serious yet curious. "Yes, Mr. President. What do you need?" "Don't give me another report," Trump said, standing up and walking to the window, as if trying to escape reality. "I want you to arrange a meeting with scientists, environmental experts. I want to hear all their ideas about protecting the environment and how we can develop without destroying this planet." Kellyanne stood in silence for a moment, a bit surprised, but also realizing this was a very different request from President. "Do you want your administration to change its policy on the environment?" Trump turned back to look at her, his gaze determined. "Maybe. Don't you see?" What Emily said, it really made me rethink. Perhaps it's time we do something for the future of the country and the world. Kellyanne was speechless. These words from him were unlike anything he had said before. In fact, during his campaign, Trump had repeatedly criticized environmental protection policies and pledged to withdraw from international agreements. Now, he wanted to take a completely different path. But Kellyanne knew that when Trump made a decision, it wouldn't change. This was his opportunity to truly make a difference. "Yes, Mr. President. I'll start working with the research team immediately," Kellyanne responded. Trump nodded and sat back in his chair, his eyes still not leaving the window. The environment, the survival of the planet, these were not things he had cared about before. But today, something had changed. He couldn't deny the truth that Emily had opened a door in his mind, and he couldn't let it close. No matter the opposition or the difficulty, he would not step back. Meanwhile, news about the meeting with Emily quickly spread, and media outlets reported it everywhere. News channels quickly recognized the shift in the president's perspective. Both his supporters and critics were stunned, because everyone knew such a decision could cause significant disruption in the country's policies. Those close to Trump also sensed that this was a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire nation. Emily, unaware that her meeting with the president had such a profound impact, had now become a name spoken by many. She didn't know that she had changed history, but one thing was certain: the world would never be the same again. After Kellyanne left the room, Trump sat quietly for a while, his eyes constantly moving over the photos on the wall, pictures of meetings, agreements, and milestones in his political career. Each photo contained a piece of the past, but now he felt as though those photos were no longer everything. More important things were beginning to form in his mind, and one of them was the question Emily had asked. Suddenly, he stood up, walked to his desk where a thick file was waiting. Instead of opening it, he pointed to his mobile phone and made a call to the Secretary of the Environment, Scott Pruitt. "Scott, I need you here immediately," Trump said, his tone serious. "We need to talk about the environment. There are some big changes I want to make." Within an hour, Pruitt arrived. After greeting him, he quickly sat down and listened as Trump explained what he was thinking. "I don't know if we can make these changes quickly, but I've decided we're going to reassess our environmental policies," Trump said, his voice firm and without hesitation. Pruitt, although he had heard about the potential changes after the meeting with Emily, was still surprised by Trump's straightforwardness. "Mr. President, are you serious? I mean, if we make such a big policy change, it will come with a lot of consequences." Trump turned to look at Pruitt, his gaze unwavering. "I've heard enough advice about environmental protection, but when a 12-year-old girl can make me rethink, I can't just stand still and do nothing. We're going to change. I want a clear and feasible plan in hand within a month." Pruitt silently looked at Trump. He knew that in politics, such a decision could change a person's career. However, he also realized that if they didn't act immediately, the opportunity might slip away. So he just nodded in agreement. "I understand, Mr. President. We'll get to work right away." The next day, Trump held a meeting with senior officials, including scientists, environmental experts, and leaders of organizations dedicated to protecting the planet. This meeting was unlike the usual ones, where he often made decisions based on short-term economic interests. This time, he actively listened, asking everyone to contribute ideas, not just from an environmental protection standpoint, but also from a sustainable development perspective. One of the top scientists, Dr. Maria Green, presented a research project on energy conversion from renewable sources like wind and solar. "We can create large-scale renewable energy projects without harming the economy," Dr. Green said, her eyes full of hope. "These technologies not only help protect the environment, but also create thousands of new jobs." Trump listened intently, his eyes fixed on her. "Is that feasible, Maria?" he asked. "Definitely, Mr. President," she replied. "If we start investing in such projects now, we will not only save the environment but also strengthen the economy in the long term." Trump thought for a moment, then turned to Pruitt, who was sitting next to him. "Scott, what do you think? Could this affect our development strategy?" Pruitt quickly responded, "Mr. President, I think we need to evaluate carefully, but if it's doable, it's the right move. Major environmental changes will also help us build a fresh and strong image internationally." The meeting continued into the afternoon, and an initial action plan was outlined. A large program for renewable energy conversion would be implemented to reduce CO2 emissions and create new jobs in the clean industry. Although this decision could cause significant disruption to interest groups in the oil and coal industries, Trump had decided to move forward. As the meeting ended, Pruitt and the team left the room with the feeling that they had just witnessed a historic change. Trump's decisions weren't always easy to predict, but this time, they felt that he truly wanted to do something with lasting significance. Meanwhile, news of Trump's decision spread across the media. Critics reacted strongly, claiming that he was betraying his previous promises to avoid involvement in international agreements and criticizing his failure to uphold his commitment to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. However, some people showed support, stating that this was a bold and necessary step to protect the future of the planet. As for Emily, she still didn't realize the extent of the impact she had made. She couldn't imagine that one question from her could make the President of the United States change his viewpoint. However, in her heart, the belief in change had been strengthened. She believed that one person, even as small as her, could still make a big difference. The next day, as the first light of morning streamed into President Trump's office, the noisy sounds from outside no longer troubled him. In his mind, there was only one thought: how to fulfill his commitment. He knew this wouldn't be an easy change. His entire team, including political advisors, energy tycoons, and environmental experts, were all concerned about the shift. But deep down, Trump believed that this was the moment to do something greater than politics. This was his chance to establish himself as a leader who dared to defy expectations, someone ready to change the world. All day long, Trump directed his team to work tirelessly. While Kellyanne Conway was preparing media strategies to persuade the public and political parties, Scott Pruitt and the environmental experts were working on a detailed plan. First, an environmental expert team was assembled to develop renewable energy projects and CO2 reduction programs, aiming not only to protect the planet but also to create thousands of new jobs. Although the new direction was clear, Trump couldn't help but worry. He knew that this decision would not be as simple as passing a resolution or signing. Would react, and not everyone would agree. Especially the major players in traditional energy industries would not easily accept this change. But something inside him urged him to act, to change. It was the image of Emily, the smart and strong 12-year-old girl, who made him rethink what truly mattered. In the evening, after a long meeting with the experts, Trump sat alone in his office, looking out the window. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the floor. In his mind, he could still see Emily and hear her questions, simple but sharp enough to shake up long-held beliefs. One question from a little girl had made a president pause and reconsider his environmental policies. A strange feeling filled him. Was he truly on the right path? In the following days, the media campaign began to roll out. Trump's team worked nonstop to prepare for large press conferences and televised speeches, where he would publicly announce significant changes in environmental policy. Everyone was expecting a strong reaction from political opponents, interest groups, and the public. But Trump was mentally prepared for it all. He knew this was necessary, and he wouldn't back down. The entire nation watched every move of the president. Journalists, political analysts, and ordinary citizens all wondered if his decision was truly the right one. Questions about climate, the environment, and the future of the planet became a key part of discussions, and now, President Trump was ready to make his official statement. The day of the announcement finally arrived. In a press conference held at the White House, President Trump stood before reporters, his gaze confident yet thoughtful. He began, "Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand here to announce an important decision, one that is not just for the benefit of our country, but for the future of this planet. Over the past years, we've witnessed environmental devastation due to unsustainable policies. Today, I declare that my administration will begin a new campaign, a strong shift toward renewable energy, reducing CO2 emissions, and protecting our precious resources." The room erupted with murmurs. Some reporters appeared shocked, while others quickly scribbled notes. This was a stunning reversal in Trump's policy, and now, everyone wanted to know more about the next steps. "We will begin implementing large-scale renewable energy projects. We will invest in clean technologies, creating thousands of jobs for the American people. We will protect the environment not through temporary measures, but through long-term, sustainable solutions." Trump paused for a moment before continuing. "This isn't an easy decision, and I know there will be many who oppose it. But I believe that for the future of this country and the world, we must do what is right, not what is easy." A heavy silence filled the room. Trump's words were unlike any he had spoken before. It was a bold declaration, but also a challenging one. After finishing his speech, a series of questions from reporters followed. "Mr. President, are you concerned that this decision will affect the economy? Will this new policy cause the loss of jobs in the traditional energy sector?" Trump listened to each question, but inside, his resolve remained unchanged. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he also believed this was the path the country needed to take. As the press conference ended, Trump stepped outside and looked up at the vast sky. Part of him felt relieved, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. But another part of him was acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. As soon as President Trump's decision was announced, public reactions came swiftly. Environmental groups, political activists, and climate experts immediately voiced their opinions. Trump's statements split them into two distinct groups, one strongly supporting the decision, believing it to be the right step, and the other warning that it could create larger issues in the future. Support and hope. On the side of supporters, Environmental organizations were thrilled by the president's change of stance. Across the United States, there was a surge of enthusiasm and hope. Renewable energy workshops blossomed, and clean energy businesses quickly launched new projects, anticipating government support. One solar energy executive, Thomas Green, spoke to the media. "This is a golden opportunity for us to shift, not only to save the planet, but also to open new opportunities for the economy. We've been waiting for this decision for so long, and now we will act." In TV interviews, many of Trump's supporters, especially young people, felt that these decisions had been long awaited. They believed that environmental issues couldn't be ignored, and now the government was truly listening to them. "We've lived in a world dominated by short-term interests for too long. Now, the president has done the right thing. We need to act now," said one climate change activist during an interview. Opposition from opposing groups. However, strong reactions from the opposition were inevitable. Lobbying groups from the traditional energy sector, particularly oil and coal, immediately voiced their strong objections. They argued that Trump's decision could lead to the loss of thousands of jobs in the coal and oil industries. Coal workers began organizing large protests in cities and rural areas, demanding the government reverse its decision to shift to renewable energy. Michael Allen, an executive at a major oil corporation, spoke out in the media. "The president is leading the country into a new economic crisis. Abandoning traditional energy sources will cost thousands of jobs and push the country into hardship. We need to protect workers, not just focus on theories about renewable energy." Critics quickly condemned Trump for such sudden decisions, arguing that he didn't fully understand the long-term consequences for the economy. They stressed that a rapid transition would weaken the heavy industries in the U.S., causing significant damage to employment and economic stability in many regions. Protests and political opposition. Protests erupted in the streets of Washington, D.C., where citizens and workers from traditional energy sectors expressed their discontent. Slogans such as "Protect workers, not the environment," and "Don't lose jobs because of misguided policies" became common sights at rallies. They were not only protesting Trump's decisions, but also accusing the policy of causing failure in crucial national industries. The opposition party, led by Nancy Pelosi, also quickly responded by calling for investigations into whether Trump truly understood the implications of his decisions. "We are facing a jobs crisis," Pelosi declared in a press briefing. "The president has made a hasty decision without fully considering the long-term impact on American workers." Impact on Trump and his advisors. President Trump could not avoid the stress and difficulties during this period. Although he had decided to pursue the new path, the fierce opposition from various factions made him reconsider his approach. A part of him began to worry about the consequences this sudden change could bring, especially when facing resistance from political lobbying groups and major industries. In a closed-door meeting with senior advisors, Trump admitted, "We are going to face a lot of challenges, but we cannot go back. I've made my decision." Pruitt, who had been involved in this fight from the beginning, nodded. "We must stay firm, Mr. President. Though there will be difficulties, if we can overcome them, this will be a great legacy you leave behind." Pruitt's words gave Trump strength, but in his heart, the worry still weighed heavily. How could he convince the public, the workers in the energy sector, that this policy wasn't a threat? How could he maintain the support from those who had put him in office? Emily and her role. While Trump faced increasingly difficult challenges, Emily, the 12-year-old girl, was still unaware that her questions had become the catalyst for a major movement. She was continuing her studies, but in her heart, Emily felt happy knowing she had made a difference. She believed that she hadn't only helped the president change, but had also contributed to changing the world. A reporter from a popular news channel came to interview Emily about the impact of the question she asked Trump. "Do you feel proud to see the president making significant changes to environmental policy?" the reporter asked. Emily smiled, her eyes sparkling with confidence. "I don't think I did anything too big. I just wanted him to understand that we have to act now to protect the future." Her simple response embodied the spirit she carried. Faith in change and belief in the power of each. And battle over the environment began to escalate, not just within the walls of the White House, but across newspapers, television, and even on social media platforms. The sudden shift in President Trump's policy not only prompted opposition, but also left his supporters feeling uneasy. Heated debates over environmental policies, jobs, and the future of the U.S. economy intensified the political climate, creating a charged atmosphere. President Trump, despite facing resistance, remained resolute in his decision. Each day, he woke up with one goal in mind: to fulfill his commitment to protect the planet without harming the economy. But when he looked at the strong opposition from traditional industrial groups and the widespread protests, there were moments when he had to question if he was truly on the right path. The internal meeting and ultimate unity. 1 week after the major press conference, Trump held a private meeting with his closest allies. In the tense room, he observed each member of his team. Kellyanne Conway, Scott Pruitt, and senior advisors were all present, none daring to speak up too soon. Everyone understood that this was a pivotal moment. "I know you're all concerned," Trump began, his voice deep and steady. "But I cannot go back. We've made this decision, and I won't back down. I want you all to prepare yourselves for a long-term fight." Pruitt, with a small smile, spoke up. "Mr. President, I think we're going to face strong opposition, but if we don't start now, we'll never have the chance. I'm ready to keep fighting with you." The support from these individuals strengthened Trump. He nodded, feeling that this unity was exactly what he needed to boldly move forward. The large protests and real change. The protests against Trump's policy grew more intense. Coal and oil workers organized large-scale demonstrations, waving angry banners demanding that the government halt measures that would destroy their jobs. Despite a large number of protesters, the resolve of those supporting clean energy policies was just as strong. In one major demonstration, a group of coal workers protested in front of the White House, chanting, "Work to live, don't die for the environment." Police and security forces were mobilized to ensure safety, but the strength of the movement was undeniable. However, despite the protests, President Trump did not alter his decision. He affirmed that this was a necessary step, not just for America, but for the world. In contrast to the waves of opposition, renewable energy projects began to be implemented. Wind and solar energy companies received strong support from the government, and workers in these industries began to see the benefits of the new policies. Additionally, policies to assist the transition for workers affected by the traditional energy sectors started to take shape. Emily, the one who made a difference. Over the following months, Emily, the 12-year-old girl, continued to become a symbol of change. While she was still just an ordinary student, her image served as an inspiration for the younger generation, showing that anyone could make a difference. One afternoon, Emily was invited to participate in a live broadcast with a major news channel, where she was asked about the question she had posed during her meeting with President Trump. She sat before the camera, her eyes shining with confidence. "We can't stand still and wait. Our world is changing every day, and if we don't act now, the future will no longer be ours," Emily said, her voice strong and clear. With just one simple sentence, Emily sparked a new wave of spirit, igniting hope that each person, no matter how small, could change the world in their own way. President Trump and long-term change. At the end of the year, as renewable energy projects began to show positive results, Trump stood before the media once more. He looked at the reporters, his voice confident but filled with reflection. "We've faced many challenges, but we are moving forward," Trump said. "We've made a real change for this country. And I believe that in the future, those who said I was wrong will look back and realize that this was the right thing to do." He paused, as if reflecting on the difficult months that had passed. The truth is, when you're standing at a crossroads, you never know if you're on the right path until you look back. And I believe we are on the right path. Finally, as renewable energy projects began to bring clear benefits to the economy, the opposition from traditional industries gradually diminished. Though divisions still existed, the United States began to see significant changes in environmental protection and sustainable economic development. The final message. History will remember President Trump not only for his controversial political decisions, but also for his bold moves in environmental policy. Although the path he chose was not easy, it proved one thing. Sometimes, it only takes one moment, one question, one person to change an entire nation and lead the world to a different future. The story of Emily and President Trump will be told as a lesson in determination, faith in change despite challenges, and the importance of the decisions we make today to protect tomorrow. The story of President Trump and Emily was just the beginning of a long and challenging journey. Sometimes, big changes start with small things, a question, an idea, an action that may seem insignificant. But if we dare to think differently, take action, and face challenges, these changes will create a powerful impact. Leave a comment below and share this story with those you think will be inspired by it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the inspiring stories and valuable lessons.